Destined Rivals has been out on live for a few days now, so we have some online tournaments to look at, and we have a rough idea of how it's going to impact the overall meta. There's only going to be one major tournament in this format, and that's going to be NAIC, and cups and challenges are over for the season, so this format is really just going to be played online and at local unsanctioned events. This is also looking to be the last set that we're going to see the owner's Pokemon mechanic in, and so far they've been overall pretty underwhelming, but I think some of the best ones are printed in this set. And we immediately see that reflected in the first online tournament with Destined Rivals that got over 100 people. There are 3 Marnie's Grimmsnarl Frostlass decks in top 8. I think this is looking to be a pretty solid deck right now. These Frostlass Monkey Dory decks have been pretty solid for a while, but they were always a little bit awkward to play, and they were really missing that big attacker, which Grimmsnarl seems to be the perfect fit. This deck is really trying to open up the game with Badoo and start establishing some Monkey Dories and Impidimps. From my limited testing with the deck, getting out 1 Frostlass is usually enough. Even just having 2 out, the damage on your own board can get pretty overwhelming, so that's why in this list here we're seeing a 2-3 build, because even if 1 Snow Run is prized, it's really not the end of the world, but it never really hurts to get down 2 Snow Runs and evolve 1, because a lot of decks are going to target down the Frostlass. And then we're going to try to slow the game down with Badoo, while we also build up our Monkey Dories with Dark Energies and get out a Grimmsnarl or 2. I think 2 is probably going to be the magic number for most games, with really as many Monkey Dories as possible on the bench with Dark Energies. It's probably usually going to be 2, but getting the 3rd one out is definitely going to be nice. And the Grimmsnarl's attack is a little bit underwhelming. For 2 Dark, it does 180 and then 30 to one of our opponent's bench Pokemon. But supplementing that damage with Frostlass and Monkey Dory damage, this attack can get pretty devastating really quickly, and it is not the hardest thing in the world to set up 4 prize turns with this attack, and it's just made better by the fact that Spikemuth Stadium is a thing that exists. This stadium is actually insane. It just lets us search our deck for a Marnie's Pokemon. So with just Secret Box, we're able to grab rare candy in the stadium and then use the stadium to get Grimmsnarl and get it out, put a bunch of energy in play. And this list even plays the 1-of energy switch, which I really like in the deck. 2 would be really nice, but it's just hard to fit. The energy switch is nice because Grimmsnarl accelerates 5 energy from the deck to Marnie's Pokemon, so we can't put them on our Monkey Dories, but we can overload a Grimmsnarl and then energy switch to a Monkey Dory and be able to set up multiple Monkey Dories all in one turn, with one with the energy switch and one with our hand attachment. Or we can even just bench a Monkey Dory, attach the dark energy to it, use the ability, and then E-switch to a new monkey. So while the E-switch is hard to fit in the deck, I do think it's a strong piece and it's definitely worth the space. The one thing that this deck is missing is the TM devolution, which maybe this player just found that it wasn't that necessary. I don't know, I think it seems pretty good in the deck, especially for something like Dragapult. And I haven't played the most amount of games with this deck, but I imagine that it's a bit on the trickier side to play. I don't think it's probably the hardest deck in the world to play, but it's certainly not an easy deck. And I think that this deck is looking to go second and either use that TM Evo or Badoo. Most games are probably going to be Badoo, but TM Evo can be nice in a tough situation. Just Evo up into a Morgrim and a Frostlass, start getting damage in play right away. I'm definitely looking forward to see how this deck does at NAIC, because having a new deck in the meta is always pretty cool. There's also a few older decks that did well in this tournament. Actually, Charizard Pidgeot ended up winning it, and it did take down a Marnie's Grimmsnarl in the finals, which is a little bit surprising. I would think that's a fairly tough matchup for Charizard Pidgeot decks, especially when the Grimmsnarl list that it played in the finals did have the TM devolution, but the double Charmeleon was probably pretty nice for that. I suppose they probably just were able to kind of wipe the board with some Dusknors and maybe a boss's orders. They also had the Hero's Cape, which has the potential to keep Charizard at a 2-shot range from Grimmsnarl, but with the Monkey Dory damage, I would imagine that that is not the case. There were actually 2 Charizard Pidgeot decks in the top 8 of this tournament. I didn't see many of them in the tournaments after that, but maybe it is a deck to revisit. Now, the 3rd place deck here is what I think is probably the best way to play Charizard right now, and that is just Dragapult Charizard. This list though is a little bit interesting. I don't know if this is exactly how I would play it. Like I think the 4th Dracloak is really good. 2nd Rare Candy is nice to have as well. And only 1 TM Evo really seems necessary whenever I play the deck. I don't think I've ever used the TM Evo actually playing this deck. I usually play it with double Badoo and just end up using Badoo while I evolve up into my Dracloaks and build up some energy and play maybe. But the version that I've been playing is playing a few Brock Scouting and a Jack. This list though also features the Team Rocket's Watchtower. It seemed like quite a few people were more worried about Noctowl decks than I would originally expect, because I would think that Terror Box is going to kind of drop off with Shaman coming out, and I think particularly with a deck like this, it is pretty easy to build up enough threats in play where something like Sylveon's Angelite attack isn't really the end of the world, because it's not too awfully hard to get out 3 Dracloaks and a built up Charizard and a built up Dragapult. So I don't know if this is the deck that I would expect the Rocket or the Watchtower in, but maybe it is also just good for Ursaluna. The Prime Catcher as the ace spec is also a little bit interesting. Prime Catcher is one of those cards where it's never going to be bad in any deck ever. Chi-Yu is, I think, really good in the deck. It is probably the only good way that the deck has to beat Goldengo. And also now that that toedscruel deck has been popping up, it's going to be good into that. And it's also going to come up in any matchup where we just want to put our opponent on odd prizes and we can just stuff this thing in the active. And even if they boss something up and off our bench and knock that out, we can just send the Chi-Yu back up and attack with it again until they are forced to deal with it. Now in 10th place, we see a Team Rocket's Mewtwo deck, which there is one that did better, but I like this list more than the other one, so I wanted to point this out. Now the thing about Mewtwo is its HP is really good. The attack seems good enough, but the card kind of just ends up being a worse Raging Bolt, and the only thing that makes it better is the Team Rocket's engine. The main reason I like this list more is because of the 2 energy switch. I think that the Mewtwo deck needs some type of way to build up an attack in one turn. Big basic decks just aren't as effective anymore if we're having to attach multiple times to them, because without the energy switch, we have to choose to go first and get an energy attachment down on our Mewtwo, and then we can attack with it on the next turn after also having to fill our bench up with Spidops and get energy in the discard pile for those. And then if our opponent is able to respond and knock out our Mewtwo on that turn, the matchup can get really awkward from there, and we're forced to attack with something like Mimikyu or just the Spidops itself, which might not be the worst thing in the world, but I think we do at least want the option to attack with the Mewtwo, like build it up in one turn. And we do also have the Team Rocket's Petrol, which is just a reprint of an old Skyla card that lets us just search our deck for a trainer, so we're able to grab Energy Switch with that. And I probably got a little too far ahead of myself here, but the whole appeal of the Team Rockets deck is the engine itself, with the Team Rockets Transceiver card that lets us grab a Team Rocket supporter out of our deck, and then the supporter package that we get with Giovanni just being an effective Guzma reprint. It's Boss's Orders combined with a switch, and then we have the Archer that lets us force our opponent to shuffle their hand to their deck and draw 3, and we do the same, but we draw 5, which can be really strong. It's like a better Iono early game, but a worse Iono late game. And the Team Rocket's Proton is a card that I've thought they should have made just for any deck for quite a while. We can play it on our first turn going first, and we just search our deck for 3 basic Team Rockets Pokemon, and we even put them into our hand, which is really strong. I don't think that if a card was made like this for any kind of Pokemon, they probably shouldn't go to the hand, they should go to the bench. Being able to put Pokemon into the hand is just a lot stronger, but I do wish that we would see more supporters like this. And we also get to play the Team Rockets Articuno that says all of our basic Rockets Pokemon aren't affected by any effects of attacks. So this is like Dragapult's damage counters, any special conditions like paralysis or Monkey Confusion, any attack that would say like discard an energy from your opponent's active or move an energy. This would protect our basic Rockets Pokemon from that, which is just really strong. The charging up Spidops, I think this card is really cool. I wish the attack wasn't so focused on the Team Rockets decks, but once during our turn, we get to attach an energy from our discard pile to this Pokemon. So that is any type of energy. And then the attack for Grass Colors does 30 for each of our Rockets Pokemon in play, which is a solid enough attack in a deck like this, but I don't know, the way I'm interested in this card is combined with the R.LUM.R that moves fire energies and trying to recreate like the old deck Quagsire Naganadel, Nagquag, and you just use the Spidops just to charge up energy and then would move the energy forward to the active Pokemon with the R.LUM.R and be able to build up things like Iron Hands in one turn, which would be really cool. And that's definitely something that I've been thinking about and trying to figure out how to make it work. And probably the most insane stadium in the game right now is a Team Rocket's exclusive stadium, which says if either player played a supporter that has Team Rocket in its name, just draw 2 cards. This can be activated at any point in the turn. The way that I at least would expect this stadium to be worded is we would have to draw the 2 cards right after we finish the effect of the supporter card, but we could play like the Team Rocket's Giovanni card, bring up our opponent's active Pokemon, and if the deck had Unfair Stamp in it, we could then play Unfair Stamp, and then after the stamp, activate the Team Rocket's factory to draw 2, which is a pretty crazy card. There are a lot of good Rockets cards, but the Pokemon are just a little bit underwhelming. Like what I was talking about with the Mewtwo earlier, with it just being a worse Raging Bolt, is we have to have the effective 3 energy on the active and then discard 2 energy from the bench just to do 280 damage. And Raging Bolt does 350 damage for 5 energy and doesn't have all these extra requirements where we need to discard specifically from the bench and we need 4 Team Rockets Pokemon in play. And Raging Bolt can also like have 300 HP with an Ancient Booster Capsule if we wanted to include that in the deck. So it's cool to see this deck doing well, but I won't be surprised if it doesn't turn out to be a meta deck, unfortunately. I do expect something that runs the Team Rockets engine to be meta at some point, just because these supporters and the transceiver in the stadium are so strong. This deck I haven't thought too much about and haven't really played any games with. I imagine it's on like the easier to medium end as far as difficulty goes, and we are going to want to go first with this deck and try to play our Team Rockets Proton to establish some basic Pokemon as well as get an energy attachment onto our Mewtwo. Next we have the Tournament of Doom, and this is where I kind of started noticing an interesting trend where Joltik Box is doing quite well in this format. Of course, I haven't really been keeping up super well with the online tournament meta lately, so it's possible that Joltik Box has just been doing well ever since it was discovered, but we see quite a few in top 8 in some of the following tournaments. But this one was won by a Dragapult Goldengo deck, and I'm pretty sure it's just a fairly straightforward average Goldengo Dragapult deck with no Crispin or Rare Candy or anything like that, just mostly relying on the Dracloak for draw and then sometimes attacking with Dragapult like into Cornerstone Ogerpon and any situation where I suppose you could get the 2 energy on the Dragapult and attacking with it would be good. But it looks like the Goldengo Dragapult did take down a Team Rocket's Mewtwo deck in the finals, and this is the other list that I was talking about before. This one is quite interesting to me. There is no energy switches or any way to build up Mewtwo in one turn, but there's also only 2 Team Rocket's Mewtwo in the deck. So I'm guessing that the deck is really focusing on like taking down support Pokemon with the Spidops and taking knockouts with the Mimikyu. The Team Rocket Zapdos is in here, which I'm sure I'm missing something that's really obvious, but I just can't think of what it is. I don't know what this would be for. Maybe it's just to knock out Badoo for 1 energy, because we can't use the second attack because of course the Team Rocket's energy doesn't count as a lightning type energy. So all that I can think of is just an extra basic to have, and it can knock out baby Pokemon, and the effect of the attack moving an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon to one of their bench maybe comes up in niche situations. Like that could be pretty annoying for Dragapult to deal with. But yeah, that would be my guess, is that this deck, this version of the list, is really just trying to focus down support Pokemon, take maybe 2 to 4 prizes with the Spidops and maybe knock out some baby Pokemon with Zapdos, and then finish the game with Team Rocket's Mewtwo into perhaps Mimikyu. If the Mewtwo attack isn't enough, the Mimikyu can clean up after. I don't know, this is an interesting list, and it is a deck that I have to play around with. It's just not super high on my list to try out right now. I'm more interested in Cynthia's Garchomp and Grimmsnarl. Now, of course, we do see Gardevoir still doing well. Gardevoir's not going anywhere. The deck is just so strong, and having one bad matchup in the format isn't enough to chase out any meta deck unless like 90% of the room was Grimmsnarl, and I don't even know if the matchup is as bad as it might seem when first thinking about it, but just having like 7% of a major event playing Grimmsnarl isn't enough for Gardevoir to totally disappear. We see that this is kind of like William Azevedo's winning list from whatever that regional was, with the heavy TM Evo, heavy Curlia. There is no Mew EX in the build though, which I am a pretty big fan of the Mew. I've been really liking it, but I guess with the 4 Iono, 4 Research, 3 Arven, there's probably not the most amount of hands where there's not a supporter, but I don't know if I'll really ever play a Gardevoir list without it personally, but that is just me. And the 2 Monkey 3 Dark seems a little underwhelming to me, but kind of my thought with that is with the TM Evo, probably more often getting out a turn 2 Gardevoir. So there's not as many games that setting up a third monkey is as important. Since we got our Gardevoir out turn 2, we're not trying to make up that extra prize that we might have to if we don't get Gardevoir out till turn 3. So that's kind of my guess as to why the 2 monkey is fine. Because lately when I've been playing Guardy, I have quite a few games where I'm able to set up 3 monkey dories and just finish off the game in a couple of turns. And the Joltik lists are basically exactly the same as they were before, except this one has 2 gravity mountains instead of just the 1, just leaning a little bit more into having to maybe one-shot a Gardevoir EX or a Dragapult. There's also a Defiance band over Vitality band, which I think the Vitality band might be slightly better. I get the logic behind the Defiance band is Pikachu can now one-shot Dragapult or a Gardevoir, but the problem is those decks don't really have to go ahead against you. Maybe there's some other application for it, like some kind of Iron Hands math or even Blood Moon so that it can knock out a Goldengo maybe. But from what I was seeing with these tournaments, it looks like Joltik Box might even be in a better spot than it was before. I don't know, maybe I'll go back through a bunch of old tournaments and leave a note in the video if Joltik Box has just been doing super well online for, ever since it came out or whatever. We of course see another Marnie's Grimmsnarl that is pretty commonplace in these top cuts. We do see a Flareon box still doing well. I've definitely seen a few of these in top cut or on the verge of top cut. And this is Cal Connor here playing this. He's definitely done well at major events, so a solid player for sure. Makes sense because this deck is super hard to play. And it's one of those decks that it's so hard to play and the power level isn't as high as you would normally like a deck that is so hard to play to be, that it almost feels like, is it really worth it? I'm like trying so hard and thinking so deep into the whole game just to have a deck that maybe isn't even as strong as just playing Dragapult or Gardevoir. But the main upside to this deck now is probably the Leafeon. So we've got a solid Dragapult matchup, and now with the Leafeon, the Grimmsnarl matchup gets better. I'm pretty sure this deck is still just unfavored into Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir actually is favored into all of the Noctowl decks. I think we all thought that it was going to be super unfavored against Terrabox at the beginning of the format, but it turned out to really not be that bad of a matchup. This deck is still pretty cool. We see the Chi-Pao in here, which is for the Watchtower Stadium that shuts off Noctowls. And one thing to note is this only works from hand. We can't like nest ball for this Chi-Pao to bump a stadium. It says when we play it from our hand, we may remove the stadium. So we would have to either Ultra Ball or Brock Scouting for it, which I'm guessing is a really solid reason to play Brock Scouting over the supporter that grabs 3 EX Pokemon. Can't remember the name of it right now, but that supporter is normally way better than Brock's in this deck, so we can grab like Bezendipity or Flareon and even an EVX for next turn. But now we have the benefit of grabbing Chi-Pao with Brock, so Brock's is just a little bit better. We can also even use the second attack of Leafeon in this deck, which can be a pretty solid, well, it's really good against Grimmsnarl, but it can also be a solid attack into any deck like Dragapult or even Gardevoir if Guardy's setting up your Hoots or Noctowls or Fan Rotom to be that extra odd prize at the end of the game, because it does 230 and heals 100 from all of our bench Pokemon. So that is a pretty good attack to have access to, I would imagine. This next one is the Jester's Monthly Challenge. And we see a grimmsnarl from Korea winning, which is pretty cool. Once again, it's just a pretty average, I guess, grimmsnarl list. They do have the Maractus, which I don't know. I was originally playing that when I was trying out the deck. I'm not 100% sure if it's needed anymore. Like the old Frostlass deck, it was definitely needed to try and buy time at the end of the game, or certain matchups where it would do maybe it wasn't as impactful. Could always use Maractus to stick something in the active. Other than that, it basically looks like the other grimmsnarl list. And we see it taking down a Dragapult Dusknoir in the finals, and once again, a pretty typical Dragapult Dusknoir deck. It is a very thick Dusknoir line, the 3-2-1. No rare candy in this deck. I'm really surprised to still see no rare candy and no Crispin in all these Dragapult decks. I thought for sure that they would eventually evolve to be a little bit more turbo to be able to handle those fast deck matchups like the Raging Bolt decks like that, but we don't see that. We don't even see a Shaman in here, which is fine. I think Shaman is one of those cards where even if every deck doesn't play it, enough people will probably end up playing it to chase out things like Zoroark or even Baby Raging Bolt. Now, at least in a non-open list tournament, a Raging Bolt player is going to be less likely to go out of their way to get down the Baby Raging Bolt and attach to a turn one, because they might just think, oh, my opponent's just going to bench a Shaman and now I have this on my board instead of my big Raging Bolt or whatever. I don't know if that's necessarily correct, but that wouldn't be surprising if that is the way it worked out some of the time. This deck is probably just going to be one of those decks that is quite good until it rotates. Still playing the Monkey Dorian here, which makes sense. It's one of the most broken cards in the game. We also see a Gardevoir in third place. This list is pretty interesting, and I think it is also pretty cool. I might try something like this with Gardevoir. They have 4 Monkey Dory and 4 Dark Energy, which Monkey Dory's insane. Might as well lean into it a little bit. The one card that I think would make a lot of sense in a deck like this is Fluttermane. I have been playing a good amount of Gardevoir lately, and there has been not a small number of games that I've thought to myself, oh, if I had Fluttermane here, I could basically just win the game on the spot just by being able to like knock out both of my opponent's evolving basics, or, you know, anything that the Fluttermane attack would allow me to do. And I think that would definitely be a nice fit in a deck like this, but we just see the really thick Gardevoir line, even a Klefki to maybe try and slow down like Noctowl decks. I can't off the top of my head think of anything other than Noctowl decks and Joltik box that this would be super impactful against at the beginning of the game. I'm sure that there's something that I'm missing, so I'm just kind of like looking at these and going with it. But as we can see, Guardy stays the same. It is still going to be a very good deck. They are playing the Shaman. I think the Shaman is just a easy replacement for Rabsca. Sure, it doesn't block damage counters, but Dragapult is a pretty straightforward matchup from all the games that I've played with it. But yeah, Guardy is definitely still good, not going anywhere. Great Tusk Mill in 4th place. That is so cool. It is the Dunsparce build with the neutralization zone. This is done pretty well a few times, so maybe it's kind of an underrated deck right now. And the game being so slow with all the evolution decks like not even attempting to be fast is definitely only going to favor a mill deck, because if like you're playing against Dragapult that is just trying to buy 4 turns to build up their board, Great Tusk is more than happy to just let you take your 4 turns while they mill, you know, 16 cards or whatever from your deck. So pretty cool. I think it would be cool to have like a mill deck around. They're definitely not the most fun thing in the world to play against, but these types of mill or a control deck usually can keep the other decks honest and kind of rein in the meta a little bit. So they're generally a good thing to have around. We do also see a ceruledge R.LUM.R deck making top cut at this tournament. There is no Briar in this list, which is, I don't know, Briar's like a super good card to have, but I guess it's not super reliable to draw into, even though with the R.LUM.R I would kind of expect that it would be like at least slightly more reliable to be able to get into it. I don't know. I've not really tested the deck, so I can't really speak on that. This is another deck though that would be cool if it had a little bit of potential. It is definitely going to be a pretty straightforward, easy deck to play. Just go first, try to Carmine, use Squawkabilly, burn through the deck, get some Charcadets and a Baroom down, and get energy in the discard pile. There's even the 2 Professor Turo, so getting something stalled in the active isn't much of a worry. Well, there's that and the 4 jet energies, which, yeah, getting something stalled in the active is not going to be much of a problem. The 4 luminous energies is an interesting inclusion, I guess. Maybe they were really worried about getting something stuck in the active and thought, hey, I'm just going to be able to attack with my R.LUM.R. I'm not concerned with that at all. The Hulucha is another interesting inclusion. I don't know if there's something super obvious that I'm missing, but I don't know what in the world the Hulucha could be for. Who knows? It's in here and it got top cut. Yeah, maybe that'll be a deck that sticks around. And the last tournament is the Oceanic tournament. I'm going to go over this one real quick because I am starting to lose my voice. It was won by Joltik Box and Henry Chow's Guardy list got second place. And we also see a toedscruel deck here in Top Cut. Looks like the same list from Portland, I believe it was, except of course the Shaman is added in. This is a deck where my first thought is to go first with this deck, but I think it actually might be a go second deck because it's going to be pretty easy to get a Teal Mask Ogre Pawn attack off or even an Iron Leaves attack. So this deck is probably going to be pretty flexible, and it could even be a deck where you just change whether you go first or second depending on what your opponent wants to choose. Like if you're up against a Guardy or Dragapult, they want to go second, so you just choose second and try to start attacking. Maybe their setup will be a little bit subpar because they went first, couldn't play a supporter, and yeah, the Slime Mold Colony Toedscruel is still going to be very good, I would imagine. Definitely an underplayed card at the moment, and cool to see this deck still, performing. The other notable deck in this top cut is yanmega Dunsparce. I don't know if this person got this list from, I think Little Dark Fury did a video on this, or if it was the other way around. I think the video came out before this tournament, so I'd imagine he saw it on there. The yanmega, when you switch it to the active, can get 3 grass energy and attach it to itself, and then it has an attack that does 210 and moves 3 energy off this Pokemon to the bench. So that's why the Iron Hands is in here. We can attack with the yanmega, move 3 energy to the Iron Hands, and then have an Iron Hands just 1 lightning away from attacking already for next turn. And we have the Dunsparce for draw, which means we also get the EX with its attack that does 60 for each Pokemon EX that the opponent has in play, which is a very solid attack, especially against things like Raging Bolt, and even can be good against EV Box and decks like that. And then there's just a couple of Dragapults, a Raging Bolt, and another Joltik Box to finish off the top cut. Yeah, that is what the meta is looking like now. So as always, a shout out to the channel members. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And like or dislike, comment, and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.